the next couple of weeks, so I told them as they were putting this series together, this is going to be a 3-week series. It may go 3, it may go 5 weeks, kind of depending upon how I kind of roll into this. One of the key verses is Romans 8:38, and it says, "Nothing will separate. Nothing can break us apart. Nothing will separate us from the love of God." And so you start looking at this, and that's a paraphrase. I don't have the Bible. I don't have the scripture right in front of me. But the next 5 weeks have this potential to change your life in a significant way. If you really just stand here and you start to do the right things, you take a stand for what's right, you take a stand doing what's right, and you start taking and doing what's with the right time and the right situations, there's a lot of things that can change the outcome of different courses that you have going on. And so what I want you to start thinking about is not only nothing will separate, but also taking a stand as you're doing. A lot of times we tend to compromise. What happens is we compromise in different situations. I feel like I'm going in and out. Is that what's going on? Yeah. And I'm pretty loud, and so but a lot of times we tend to compromise. We compromise the wrong things at the wrong times for the wrong reasons, and it costs us more than we imagine. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to spend some time in Daniel. And so if you look at Daniel, Daniel took a stand. And he stood there and he said, even though the things that are going on, because if you just, we're going to open up to Daniel 1 if you have a Bible. If you don't, we'll get you a Bible. But when you start looking at it and you start seeing is that from the beginning, Daniel starts being persecuted. He starts seeing this, he has this whole thing that goes on where he's forced into different situations. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about standing out for God, standing up, standing for, standing against, and standing with. And I think that all of them kind of keep us together and keep us where we don't separate from God. If you look at Daniel 1, if you open it up, and so this is at this point where King Nebuchadnezzar takes over and destroys and goes through and wipes out Jerusalem. They burn the temples down. He destroys the city. He just tears it apart. And really, he starts to humiliate God's people by taking these faith symbols from the temple, and he basically brings them back to his temple, his gods is what he calls them. And he brings them in there and he puts them in there. And he really comes to this, it is this humiliating thing. This is happening around 605 BC, if you're kind of one of those history type people. So this is happening in 605 BC. And when you start listening, so Nebuchadnezzar comes out and he goes, "I want you to go out and I want you to go get the best of the best. We're going to integrate these people into our society. We're going to take them and we're going to teach them. We're going to force them into what we believe, force them into our lifestyles, into our customs, and they're going to do and become like us." And see, this is kind of what's happening now, right? Isn't that what's kind of happening in our situation, in our community now? Is that we've been forced into these different situations. We've been forced into these different laws that they're passing, these different things that are coming up, where 3/10 of the population is determining policy for the 99%, and it's very, very, it's starting to sit there and they're forcing all of this stuff down on us. And see, here's the deal, is that we have this choice. We can either make the choice to stand and do what's right, or we can and stay with God and know that nothing will separate us, not even other people. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to put it out there. Just because something is legal doesn't mean it's right. Okay, just because something is legal doesn't mean that God looks down on it and goes, the government said that's okay. That doesn't mean that it's right in God's eyes. There's lots of things that are legal that we choose not to do, right? There's lots of things out there that are legal that we choose not to do because God says, this is the direction I want you to go. This is the direction I want you to be in. And so when you look back at this, Daniel and his friends so first off, they're like in between 12 and 15 years old. Okay, they're young. And, the 12 to 15-year-olds, they're the people that tested, you had their kids that get those little fill-in-the-blank tests or those little bubbles, and a kid is an amazing genius. Like they knew that at 10, right? Or they knew that at 12. And I've known that their whole lives. But the reality is they can tell from these tests, and they know that they're going to try and take the best out of the best, and they're going to try and integrate them into Babylonian culture and into traditions, and they're going to try and make them future government leaders to deal with the people of Israel. They're going to try and make it to where, Daniel ends up becoming a governor and helping guide and lead. So if you look at this in Daniel 1, verses 3 through 5, it says, Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of his court officials, to bring the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and nobility, young men without any physical defect. handsome. They had to be good looking. So I'm still qualifying, right? I got no physical defects, and I'm handsome, so I still qualify. Showing aptitude for all kinds of learning. I can do that. I can learn things. You might have to tell me 5 or 6 times, but I can get it. Well-informed. I know a little bit about a lot of things, so I qualify. Quick to understand. Ugh. Now it starts coming up that's and qualified to serve in the king's palace. So you start seeing these things, and you start going. So they go and they grab these guys that are just like the best of the best, and they've looked at them and they've seen them, and the king assigns them a daily amount of food and wine. So actually, let's go back. He was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table, and they were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. So think about this. You have to be intentional about things. You have to be intentional about how you think. You have to be intentional about how you behave. And you have to be intentional about what you believe. So think about this. You have to be intentional about these things. You have to be intentional about what you think. I've used the line before. You have the vulture and the hummingbird. The vulture always is looking for death. The hummingbird is looking for sweet, nectar, life. They're how they're looking and how they think about things and what they're looking for, they always find what they're after. And so you start looking at this and you start going, how you think obviously affects what goes on here. So how you think. Now, the enemy also has this thing. It's trying to affect how you think. The enemy here. We need to integrate them into our culture. We need to integrate them into Babylonian traditions. We need to integrate them to this way. We need to change how they behave. We need to change what they believe. We need to make these things, and so they are intentional about this. And they look at it and go, it's going to take us about 3 years to figure this out with 12-year-olds or 15-year-olds. It's going to take us some time to do it. It's like a full-scale attack. They seduce, lie, deceive. It's happening now. The media seduces, lies, attacks. The advertisements that you look at. Have you ever look at the advertisements at all? You ever go through them and kind of look at them? You know, some of you guys, you'll say that a can of Monster means something, or, and you start looking at these and people try and discover what all of these things have these meanings to them, and maybe they do. The music. Years ago, a song came out, and I was sitting there and I was listening to it, and I go, just say that? And I'm not going to say what he said, but I believe he said he wanted to slap her with something. And I go, but the funny thing is that the kids that were in the car with me were singing the song. And I go, I go, what? Can you believe that the music that we listen to, our kids are singing things? So if you're listening to secular type music and you're listening to it on a regular basis, listen to what your kids say. There's a Taylor Swift song out there and it says, I'm going to cause him to sin tonight. That's what she says. And you start looking at this and your children are singing along to these songs. They're the ones that are into it. They're going, I want to cause him to sin tonight. That's not what we're after, right? We're after trying to build one another up. And so when you start listening to the music, and what you say and what you hear tends to be what you end up believing. There's those subtle messages, right? They're all throughout it. They make you buy. They make you believe different things. And they make you think about different things. When you start looking at it, you start thinking in different ways. It just happens very subtle. I will tell you is that you cannot passively be a Christian. You can't just passively try and, I'm going to just be a Christian today, not tomorrow. I'll be a Christian for the next 5 minutes. Or not the next hour. It's like what you're saying, if you're going to try and passively be a Christian, what you're saying is that one meal is enough. I'll live the rest of my days just with one meal. Or one workout, and I'm going to get yoked. I'm going to go to the gym right now, and I'm going to come back out, and I'll just be like, Hulk strength, Hulk smash, and that's what you're thinking. It's one workout. That's what you're thinking. That's what, Tajay went to the gym, looked at it yesterday. He looked at it, right? He just sat there in front of it and goes, I really, really want to go in there. but we're at the mall. I could really go do some shopping. Yeah, and so when you start looking at things, we expect these immediate results, and we expect it to happen almost right away. You think that 1 hour in church is going to make the amazing difference. You show up one time, you go, I'm going to sit in church for 1 hour, and all of a sudden my life is going to change. No, it's not going to change in 1 hour. Now, some things will start to change, but this will not be what makes it, this is not what's going to happen and be what changes everything this 1 hour. Ephesians 6. And we're going to use verses 11 and 13. It says, put on the full armor of God so you can take your stand against the evil schemes, the devil's evil schemes. You start looking at it. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground after you have done everything to stand. And it just continues to say, to be able to stand your way, you have to have the full armor of God. You have to continue to put it on. You have to be pursuing it. Among those were chosen were some from Judea, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And the chief official gave them new names. 4 boys, 12 to 15 years old, uprooted from their family, moved 1,000 miles away from home. They're taken from where they live at, and they're moved 1,000 miles away. They're stripped of their identity, and they're crushed of any sense of dignity. Isn't this, you start listening to this and you start seeing what happened. They had names, their names were changed. They had names that were all related to Yahweh, the true God. And they were all changed, their names were all changed to Babylonian type gods. They changed their diet. The king, they eat food that was prepared for a king, meat, wine that was dedicated to pagan gods. You start reading all this stuff and you start seeing what happens, and everything was changed from what they believed. What they knew. It's exactly what's happening to us. They were completely separated from what they knew and what they believed. They were separated from their families. They were separated from everything. And so what I tell you is that Daniel takes this stand and he goes, and he doesn't take a stand in this evil way. He takes this stand and he goes, this is the direction that I'm supposed to go, that God has asked me to go. This is the direction I'm supposed to go. God said, this is where I want you, this is what I want you to do. And he understands that the situation that he's in is out of his control. Just like for some of us, the situation that we're in right now is out of our control. There's so much that's going on. We don't policies. We don't determine what the governor or the president or all those things do. We can determine who those people are, but we don't get to determine what they're doing on a regular basis. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. So, think about this. He didn't fight when his name was taken. They knew who they were. Those were just outward labels. They knew who they were. Somebody, here's the deal is that I know when I walk out of the room, people call me stuff behind my back. I know that some people I walk out of the room and they may go, oh, that's Pastor Mike. Or they might go, he's whatever. That's just how it is. But I know who I am. I know who God says I am. And so the question comes in for you is, do you know exactly who you are? Do you know that God says this is who you are? And these outward labels that people tend to put on you, don't take them and go, well, that's who I am. We tend to take those outward labels because we hear them often. We hear them all the time. There's some outward labels that describe us, but that doesn't mean that we identify by those. That doesn't mean that we identify by them. Or it's like it's like when you talk to your children, they always speak to your children positively. Always talk to them with a positive outlook. Always, even when you're telling them no, say, hey, no, don't do that. Let's try and figure out something else to do. Keep that positive mindset, and your children will think positive. But if you walk up to your kids all the time and go, you're stupid, 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 they get to that point where they believe it. They just start to, it gets ingrained in them, and they go, well, maybe I really am stupid. Maybe I'll never figure it out. Maybe I'll never get it. It just becomes who they just identify that with themselves. You have to be rooted and know who you are. You have to know that you are a child of God and that God has given you this direction. He didn't defend his name, but he took a stand when God's name was about to be defiled. He took a stand then. And he saw when God's name was going to be defamed, I'm going to take a stand here. I'm not eating the food that's been dedicated to pagan gods. I'm not going to eat that food. And he rationalized it. You know, for us, he didn't rationalize it. We rationalize it. When you start to think about this, we rationalize these things. We go, yeah, I'm not going to do that. That's going to be bad for God. But you know what? Everybody else is doing it. I have to eat, right? They're forcing me to do this. Everyone else, it's not going to hurt anybody. Those are the things that we say. Those are the things that we do. We'll start going, well, I have to do this. I have to have a car. I have to have this. I have to have these things. We tend to start going, instead of doing what God has asked us to do and taking a stand, we'll start saying, well, everybody else is doing this. Everybody else lives in debt. Everybody else has to eat. Everybody else has to do these things. And we tend to be in this position where we don't do what God has asked us to do because we look around and everybody else is doing something different. Instead of going and taking a stand and going, God, I'm going to go the direction that you've asked me to do. He had a predetermined resolution. If you're going to stand out for God, and if you're going to go in God's direction, you have to make some decisions ahead of time. You have to start making some decisions now before you even walk out of the door. Just a perfect example. If you're going to go, I'm not going to have sex before I get married, it'd be unwise to get in the back seat of the Buick with the person that you're dating, right? You'd be like, hey, why don't you get back here? And do what? What are we going to do back there? What do you think is going to happen? Well, I can tell you what's going to happen. If you say, I'm not going to get drunk anymore, but you're always hanging out in bars, well, what do you think is going to happen? If you say, I'm not going to listen to filthy jokes, but all you do is hang out with people who tell those filthy jokes all the time, what do you think is going to happen? You know, you go, I'm not going to be in private conversations. I love to tell my don't be in these private conversations. Well, you have to make these decisions beforehand. You can't just go sit there and be like, well, I'm going to go sit in my dad's office, everything he has to say. You know, or you go, I'm not going to be part of this, or I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be caught up in materialism. I'm going to spend more time with God. There's decisions that you have to make beforehand. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to keep my eyes pure. I'm going to do this. You know, like for me, anytime I go someplace with my wife, I go, I'm going to keep her as the center of my attention to where she knows that I'm not trying to look at anybody else. I'm going to do this. I'm going to have this mindset. For you, what is it that you are going to do? Are you going to give up something? Are you going to stand for what God has asked you to do? Are you going to, this is what God says I'm supposed to do. That's wrong, and I'm not going to do it. You have to start taking this stand. Because what happens is that you continue to put things in the way that start to separate us from God. You start putting things there and you go, I'm going to separate myself. I'm going to separate myself with sin. I'm going to separate myself with a lack of relationship. I'm going to separate myself from really not even knowing Him. That's the problem. See, there's nothing God, we look at this, and if you look at this verse, it says that there's nothing that any man can do to separate us from God. The problem is we do it. We separate ourselves from God. We are the ones that tend to run. We are the ones that continue to put up the roadblocks. We're the ones that separate it. It's not what anybody else has done. It's what we do. We have to start getting closer to God. We have to start looking at things. Sometimes these decisions that we make look like a one-time event. Just like Daniel, if he would have just did this as a one-time thing, it may have been, that's okay, I'm just going to do it this one time. Well, that one time leads into a decision almost daily. Well, I did it yesterday, I can do it today. Well, I did it yesterday and the day before, I can do it just tomorrow and the next day. I'll give you an example. Anybody knows what happens when you miss church one time? It gets easier the next week to miss church. And then the week after that, it's even easier. It's like, we've missed 2 weeks. You think? Yeah, we know. We do. We know when a piece of the family's missing. It's like going to your family reunion. We know when the seat, that seat that someone always sits in, you know when it's empty. You know when you go to Thanksgiving dinner and that person that maybe passed away this year, you know when they're not sitting in their normal seat? You feel it. You miss it. You know it. That's the same thing it is here. The thing is, on the other end, it gets easier and easier and easier. And we tend to make excuses about it. We go, I'll watch online. I'll do this. I'll catch it on YouTube later. I'll do these things. And we make these excuses to generalize. We go, this is the reason why I'm not doing it. I did it yesterday. Well, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it the next day. I'm going to do it. And we get to this point where it just becomes part of normal action. And we just miss and miss and miss. He stood out, though. He stood out for breakfast, lunch, dinner, the snack that you want to take in the afternoon. He stood out for these things. And he goes, this is what's going to happen. But it wasn't a public display. It was private. See, yesterday, we went out to the park and we went to go, and we did a barbecue for just really for the park. It wasn't just for the homeless community that's out there. We just did a barbecue for anybody who was in the park. If they were hungry, I invited them over, come have lunch with us. And it wasn't to be some public display or anything like that. We didn't call the newspaper and say, hey, we're out of the park feeding people. We didn't do that. We just went out and fed. That's all we did. And see, here's the thing is that when we went out and we do these things, it's not a big public show. It's a private one. We just went out there and talked to people on an individual basis. Now, I've been at some events where they got to call all these people. They got to call the newspaper. They got to make all these different calls and go, we got to get everybody out there. And that's just not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go out and we're just supposed to love. Do what God has asked us to do. Just go love. Yesterday, as we were on our way to go to the park, though, driving down North Texas, a whole bunch of people out there with these signs. And as I was driving down, I said, what is, and I love what they were trying to do, but maybe it was the method they were doing it in. And I don't want to cast judgment on another church. They had these signs that said, you need prayer. And it wasn't like a question mark at the end of it. It was just, you need it. You need to have it. Stop. And it was like, as I was driving past it, I go, that's awful. It's almost, who's going to stop when that type of situation is there? Who's going to make the stop and go? It's almost pushing people further away from God than it is bringing them in. That public display, that taking that stand or stepping out there and going, I got to make this very public, almost pushes people further away from God rather than pulling them in and going, hey, we want a relationship. We want to help you grow. We want to help you get to know who He is. Now, I don't know, maybe they had a huge successful day, and I'm all wrong about this, and I'll fully accept that. But the thing is that for me, it pushes me further away. Those are the type of things that push me further away from that type of thing. It wasn't a public show, but it was a bold display of what they did. For Daniel is what I'm talking about. It says, please, and he comes to him, and he talks to him, and he says, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. And so he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, they look healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. Instead of making this public protest, Daniel honors the authority, and he goes to them and he creates a plan, and he talks to them. Instead of going out and doing all these, so some of these things that we're doing, we start looking at some of these public protests that are out there, there's not really offering any solutions. I want you to start thinking about this. They're not offering, they're not coming up with a plan, they're not changing anything. All these things that are happening, all these places, they're just protesting to protest. They're not actually coming up with different solutions to change this. If somebody was to come in and go, hey, look, I have this plan, and it may work. But nobody's doing that. Instead, they get together, they get angry, and they break things, shoot people. It's been destructive, and it hasn't changed anything. In fact, it's created a greater divide between the parties that are protesting and also our police officers currently here. It's created this greater divide. It's created, and see, the funny part is that you didn't see, when you start looking at this, and I'll use what a police chief out of Milwaukee said. He came out and he said, you didn't see anybody protesting all the police officers that were shot. Nobody stopped everything they were doing and started protesting all that. They didn't start going and breaking down windows and stuff like that, going, you killed cops. And that didn't happen that way. But it does happen when it can become destructive, when it doesn't help. See, right now, the police are trying to go, how do we fix this? And they're coming up with a plan. It's not a big public display. They're together, and they're going, how do we fix this? How do we make adjustments? How do we do these things? Police chiefs are meeting with the president about this last week. And you start seeing this, and you start going, we don't have to make these big public displays and start making these big public protests. We can just stand out there and go, we need to create a better plan, and we need to change what we're doing. I'm not privy to those conversations. I assume that they're trying to do that. That's what I think. I guess you can stand out in the wrong type of way, though. And sometimes that's what happens with our protests. So instead of pointing, how about we pray? Instead of pointing at him going, well, what's there? How about we pray for them and start going, how do we make a change? And how do we start getting God involved in this? We need to seek the wisdom of God to stand out in the right way, to stand up and do what he's asked us to do. You know, you start thinking about this and you start going, what's the right way to go? Well, I'm not going to hang out in strip clubs. I'm not going to go to the bars. I'm going to spend time with my Bible. I'm going to do these different things, what he's asked him. Pray for me. That's what we need to do. God gave them the knowledge and understanding. Be better in school. Daniel could understand visions and dreams. He had this just ability to be able to do things. The king talked with him, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He found nobody that was close to them. Just nobody. And as Daniel and his buddies simply blended in, the whole story changes. Everything about this changes. Nothing historic would have happened. They just would have blended in, nothing historic would have happened. Or if they had stubbornly just refused to eat, they likely would have been executed. They would have just brought them out and killed them off. Time and time again, you lured in to try and blend in. All the time. You're going to have people around you trying to lure you in to try and get you to blend in to what society looks like. Come on, just do it this way. Everybody else is doing it. Just come on, let's do this. Time and time again, you're going to get people around you. Just come on, let's go here. You're going to have friends. Let's go to the bar. You're going to have friends. Let's go out to this. Let's go. You have friends that are going to go, hey, let's go do this. Time and time again, you're going to try and get lured into guys, every time you do a search online, you make the wrong search, make the simplest mistake, and all of a sudden, you get something that you weren't looking for. And time and time again, it'll happen. It's going to try and happen, but you have to make this point to take a stand. You can take a stand, and you can stand out. That's what happens. You can be that standout. We hear that. We're going to be a standout. This morning, I posted a quote on Facebook, and what I said is, I'd rather be remembered for standing out than for blending in. That's what I'd rather be remembered for. Standing out and doing something. I don't care if people talk about me behind my back. It's going to happen regardless. As soon as I walk out of the room, people talk about me. And that's okay. That is okay. That just means that they're trying to drag me back down to their level. I just need to keep walking and keep pursuing God. It's the same thing that you need to do. When people are talking about you, just go, I didn't need them in my life anyway. Let me just keep pursuing God. Let me just keep going in this direction. Let me keep doing what God has asked me to do rather than being sucked back in by other people. So you have to start thinking about this. You can take a stand for the devil's schemes that are happening. And sometimes people, the devil uses people just as God does. Suck you in. Amen. Or you can put on the full armor of God. And then you can take your stand. When you've done all else, you stand. When everything else has happened, you stand up and go, this, and see, I love to use the line, we can draw the line in the sand. And we can stand here and go, I'm going to draw this line, and I won't cross it. So the thing is you actually have to stand your ground and go, I'm not going to cross that line. I'm not going to go any further. I'm not going to go further than what this is. I've gotten to the point, and God has asked me to be in this position, and I'm not going further than that. So, and that's going to look different for a lot of us. That's going to look different in so many different ways. It could be in a relationship that you're talking with. You could be talking to somebody, and you can just sense that it's going in the wrong direction. You can just go, oh, nope, let's go back here a little bit. I'm not going past that line. It could be in a business deal. I was having a conversation with somebody, and he goes, yeah, I got this opportunity where I could do this, and I end up, and they wouldn't even know, but I'm making a whole bunch more money. Well, it's kind of, anybody ever watch your Pawn Stars at all? Anybody ever watch that show? One of the things that I kind of admire about what they do is they call an expert in to find the value. He goes, I don't know how much that is, I don't know what that's worth, but let's get somebody else involved so we know that we're both coming out on the fair side. We both know that, he comes in and they'll get somebody that comes in and goes, oh, that's worth $20,000 when the guy only wanted $500 for it. And then they negotiate from that point. They make it to where it is a fair exchange. Now, they tell them, we're going to have to make a profit. That's just how it is. It's just how the show goes. But see, that's how our business dealings could be that way. We can put our cards on the table and go, this is how we're going to do things. This is how it is. I've got to make money. I've got employees to support or whatever. I've got to be able to take care of these different things. But the thing is, when you put it out there like that, you show that you have integrity. You show that you're willing to, hey, look, this is who I am, and I'm willing to just say that I'm willing to make a fair deal. People would prefer that honesty rather than going, ooh, look, he worked me in the background. That's why nobody likes car dealers, right? Nobody goes to a car dealership and goes, they were amazing. They took all my money. Well, that's just not how it works. And they take you into 3 different rooms and take more money from you. They come into finance. Let's go take a look at this. Let's get some more money. Oh, can I sell you an extended warranty? Can I sell you paint? No, doesn't it paint it? It's got paint on it, right? You're not asking me to pick the color now, right? But that's what happens. We go in there and they just try and work us. And they try. When you lay your cards out, if you just go in there and they just go, this is what it is. This is how it's going to be. Then you make a better decision out of it. You start getting to this mindset and you start trying to do things and you just go, I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to take a stand. Now, here's the big thing. Let's take away everything else and let's make sure that we're doing everything right for God. We're going to take a stand for God. We're going to put God first in our lives. What happens so often is that we don't take a stand for God. We tend to go, God can take care of himself. I got to worry about me. And we just go, no, God back there, and we just keep backing away from the line. And we just go, no, I'm not going to stand there because then all of a sudden I get associated there. And the reality is that with God, God's going, I want you to get in. I want you to get into the water. Don't just put your foot in. And you go, it's nice. It's kind of warm. It's a nice pool. No, he wants you to get in. Get involved. Be part of it. And so often we just want to test the water every once in a while. We'll put our fingers in. Oh, it's so nice. It's warm. You see that? But we're afraid to actually get into it. Like we're walking around and it's like the pool has kind of got a different murky color to it. And we're like, man, it feels really good. But I don't know if I want to get in that. I can't see the bottom. Anybody ever go to Lake Berryessa? Do you get in that water? Anybody get in that water in Lake Berryessa? Can you imagine what's at the bottom of that lake? I mean, so many sunglasses and keys and everything else that's in there. But here's the deal. You can't see the bottom, right? And you jump into it all the time. You get into it and you're like, woo, this is great. And the reason why I bring this up is because you don't know where God's going to lead you. But maybe you should jump in and start doing what God has asked you to do and go that direction. Because what you're doing right now, it's kind of keeping you separated from what he really wants in your life. You not taking a stand, you've separated yourself and going, I'm just going to do what I want to do. So if you started taking a stand and you started going, you know what, God, this is what you've asked me to do, and that'll be the direction I go. Maybe in your house you stop watching, I don't know, it's really hard to do, but maybe you stop watching the good movies and you start watching the Christian type movies. Susan loaned me one, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. And it's still sitting in the bookcase. Like I looked at it yesterday. I said, she asked me about that about a year ago. I still have it, though, so it's good. The thing is, though, is that I haven't watched it. And it's because I go, well, I'll get to that one when I've watched everything else. I'll get to that one. It's still in the list. It's in the line of stuff to watch. But I haven't watched it yet. And so instead of going, well, I'm going to watch, I don't know, in that time frame, I think a whole bunch of bad movies have come out that I've seen. And by bad movies, I mean like The Hangover and Hangover 1, 2, and 3, and Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, Part 1 and 2. I mean, all of those things have kind of done the same. Yeah, are they funny movies? I don't know. I've never seen them. Yeah, they're funny. No, but the thing is that that's the type of stuff that we allow to kind of create this toxic heart. When we watch that stuff, it kind of creates it. Well, we laugh and we joke at it, but it creates this toxicity in our hearts that we're looking at. We look at things differently after watching that type of stuff. You watch the news, and anybody see the news? You watch it and you go, man, it's. I remember watching it. They used to have good news on. They used to talk about good things, and now it's death and destruction and this and that, and And I just look at it and go, maybe it's time to start taking a stand and going, I'm not going to watch this. I'm not going to spend, or take a stand at your house and go, we're going to sit at the dinner table together with no cell phones, and we're going to pray before every meal. Take a stand. But this is what it's going to be. Maybe you take a stand and go, I will put internet filters on in my house. I will make it to where I have an accountability partner. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if you've got a teenage kid at your house, that teenage kid is well on their way to looking at things they're not supposed to. Put a filter on. What's it going to hurt? Why would we be afraid to put an internet filter on? Use the internet to protect you and your family. And start looking at these different things. Take a stand in different situations. Take a stand. You want to start working out? Take a stand. I'm going to go to the gym every day at this time. I'm going to do it. If I'm going to do these things, now start taking a stand for what God has asked you to do. God goes, I want you to get up and I want you to spend time with me in the morning. Don't give him the leftovers. Give him the first. Say, I'm going to get up and I'm going to spend time with you. Especially if you got, and I know that you go, I got to be at work at 4 o'clock. Well, then get up 15 minutes earlier. It's the same if somebody has to be up at 7. They just go to bed at a different time. That's all it is. Get up 15 minutes beforehand and spend time with God. Take a stand. Don't give him the leftovers. You give the dog the leftovers. You give the dog the doggy bag. Spend time with God first. That's what you start making this decision. When it comes to giving, give to God first. That's what he asked you to do. Give your first. Take a stand. Start seeing what happens when you do what God has asked you to do. Because so often we go, nope, I'm going to go my direction. And your direction doesn't work. Take a stand and do life with God. Take a stand. As you start to step back, and you start to think about this right now, because even I'm thinking about it. I'm going, where have I allowed things to kind of just slide? Where have I allowed things to where I'm not holding people accountable, or where I'm not holding myself accountable, and where have I allowed these things to happen? And so I tell you is that to take this step back and start assessing these things. Just look around you. Look at more than just this immediate surroundings of praying and Bible study, and this. Start looking deeper into it and start looking at where you're allowing. Or do you allow people to gossip with you? Do you allow people to just come and, did you hear about so and so? Take a stand. Did you see this? No, and I don't want to. Take a stand. Did you hear about what's going on here? No. Because when you start looking at this, we create such destruction and such hurt through people because of rumors. And I know that so often I can become part of it. I sit there and I listen and I go, wow. But it changes things. And he's going to say, stop that. I don't need to hear that. If they want to talk to me about that, they can come talk to me about it. That changed things dramatically. Or if I'm going to start doing what God has asked me to do and start building up others. So when somebody tells you something negative about somebody, we'll go, did you hear this that's so good about them? And lift them up. Makes a big change. Start thinking about what's going on and what you allow around you. The music, the movies. Maybe on your iPad, or probably not an iPad, but maybe on your Android device, it's full of stolen music. Because that was one of the things, and I got into leadership in church. I got this huge conviction because I had gigs and gigs of music. And I got to get rid of all this. I can't have this. I'm a thief. And I deleted all of it. It went away. I can't have this. I don't even want to be associated with it. But I threw away such good music and movies and all those things. But the thing is that I felt so much better afterwards. I stepped back and I go, I know that maybe I did it, but God will forgive me, and I just need to step away from what this stuff was. I don't need that. If I need it, God will provide it. Guys, sometimes we just got to make these subtle changes and start standing up for what God has asked us to do, and start standing out. We're supposed to be set apart. We're supposed to look different. We're supposed to act different as Christians. It should start today. Nothing will separate us. There's going to be the time of this series, and we're going to go into a little more, and you'll start, nothing will, except for us. That's just kind of where it is. We tend to be the ones that separate ourselves from God. So let's take the stand and make sure that nothing will separate us and go, I will take the stand with God and nothing will separate me from him, and start moving forward. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for Daniel and just giving us this living example of him standing out in the right way, for him to stand up and say, this is the direction that I want my people to go, or this is the direction on how we should handle conflict, or how we should handle these different things that we don't agree with. He just shows us and he gives us this living example and goes, this is the way we should go. Father, we ask for strength to start to stand out. We ask for strength to start standing up for what we believe in and start doing what you've asked us to do. We ask for strength to persevere through the ridicule and the people clawing at our backs, trying to pull us backwards, when we know that the path towards you will be difficult, but so worth it in the end. Father, we ask that you give us wisdom to know which battles that we're supposed to fight and where we're supposed to stand and which direction we're supposed to go. You told us that all we have to do is ask for wisdom and you will give it abundantly. So we're asking. We need your guidance. So often, our decisions tend to lead us in the wrong direction when we don't have you there, when we don't seek your counsel. Father, allow that Spirit to come dwell in us, to make it to where we live every day with you. We go in the direction that you've asked us to go. In all aspects, whether it's getting up in the morning or going to work or wherever we're going, we just follow that voice of the Spirit guiding us and leading us. Father, thank you. Thank you for sending your Son for us. And thank you for giving us these living examples through your word. It's in your Son, Jesus' name, that we pray. Amen.